Um, I think that really, I mean, conferences and opportunities for educators to come together and share and exchange ideas are vitally important wherever they're happening. Somewhere along the way, we're at a stage where, in terms of the speed with which the world has changed, education has got a lot of catching up to do. Education is in need of a lot of reform. And that reform will only come through the exchange of ideas and through people developing clarity of understanding about what's needed and how to approach it, and having the courage then to make the changes that are needed.
Mark, according to you, what is the role of ICT in improving education scenario in India, like developing nations?
I think it's got an enormous role to play. Apart from anything else, I think that the provision of face-to-face education is at times very expensive, and IT enables us to go to enormous lengths. During my session on the stage just now, I actually mentioned that a couple of months ago I was traveling in the US and visiting a number of the Ivy League universities. And when I was in San Francisco, I got the opportunity to go to Silicon Valley and to meet Sal Khan. Sal Khan is the man behind the Khan Academy. He's a young guy, he's in his 20s. Bill Gates says he's one of the people within the IT industry who probably is going to have the most impact in the next 10 years. And the reason he's having a massive impact is because basically what he's doing is he's making enormous amounts of quality educational content available for free. Anyone can go and help themselves. Now, that's great, but also it's kind of nerve-wracking for people. It's now some years since MIT, for example, the great MIT, put all their courseware online and said people can help themselves, people can use this stuff and learn for themselves. But somewhere that works if we break through the long-held paradigm that is there, particularly in Asia, that says learning is being taught. And therefore, if I'm not being taught, am I learning? And so IT offers the opportunity for us to break through that. If I can just give another quick example. Some of the best schools in the country struggle to find top caliber teachers in certain subjects. There aren't really enough to go around. And so some of us have started to talk about, do we all have to find every one of those teachers? If we could set up the lessons to happen at the same time, we only need one teacher. And that teacher could be delivering a lesson in 5, 6, maybe 10 different schools at the same time simultaneously to 10 different groups of students. Yeah. So the role of IT is phenomenal. And as a disintermediator of content, again, massive.
Yeah. Mark, what are the initiatives of Sri Ram School in education?
What are the
new initiatives?
New initiatives? Well, we just started a new school this week. We inaugurated a school 2 days ago. Yeah. That's actually in conjunction with the Haryana Police. So that now takes us from 2 schools to 3. New initiatives, we also have construction going on 2 out of our 3 existing campuses to give us more capacity. So we're working on many, many things. We've been working for now a couple of years around orienting almost everything that happens through our school through a set of 4 core values. And I think that's quite an unusual thing. Most schools have a mission statement, but we took it further and we actually defined 4 core values that actually underpin that mission. And one of the things that enables us to do is to create a framework. You imagine the 4 core values around the 4 sides of a square, and then in the middle of the square you can put teacher freedom. Because basically within the confines of those 4 values, we can empower our teachers to just get on and make decisions without having to go all the way up through multiple chains of line to get permission for something or to exchange an idea and then all the way back down again. Instead, they can just do it. And many other things.
What are your future plans?
My future plans?
Your future plans of Sri Ram School?
Sri Ram School? Yeah. Well, I think obviously having just started a new school, that's going to be a big part of our priority for the next couple of years. Right now, the Sri Ram schools are around 4,000 students. The new school at Bonsi on the border of Gurgaon is 9 acres. That gives us a scope probably to go to about 6,000 students. There's also an entity called Shri Educare Limited, which has been set up, which is sort of separate from us, and that's working with other partners to set up other schools. So already there was a new school last year set up in Noida, the Shri Ram Millennium School. So expanding the availability of high quality education. We're certainly also keen to work around areas of teacher training and development. We do consultancy for some other schools across the country. And we're also talking with, although it's at a very early stage yet, with one or two of the new private universities that have been coming up about how we can support in areas of teacher training and helping on the development of educational leaders as well.
Your views on e-learning?
E-learning. To be honest, it's been a long time in reaching what I would call a quality level, here in India. Over the years, it's been a little frustrating at times where a lot of companies jumped on a bandwagon to provide digital content. And to be honest, I've looked at the content that was coming from a lot of these companies, and it really wasn't up to a standard that you would want. Whether it was the language that was used, spelling errors and all those sorts of things, but really as well that at times the way concepts were put across were really very cliched, and the danger as well that it was seen as somehow actually almost a hiding place for traditional teachers, because a traditional teacher now wouldn't need to change much about the way they teach, because they can spice it up by interspersing it with a bit of digital content, and there you go, students, now you don't need to worry. In terms of students moving to an entirely e-learning based thing, to be honest, it's a little bit like if you go back in time to the 1970s or 1980s, where people would try to learn languages from sets of cassettes and books and things. The motivation to learn on your own like that is really tough. And so e-learning that stands on its own, I don't know, I still remain to be convinced. The UK government spent a lot of money on an online university, which they then, after a couple of years, closed down because it just wasn't really quite working. What I see far more scope for is blended learning that looks at syllabus in a school and actually says, how can you actually look at the syllabus and say, right, these parts can be done through self-learning, and that frees up more time in the classroom to spend on real value added, where the teacher interaction with the students and student interactions with students can really add the value and use the time in the classroom. Because especially here in India, we tend to work with big syllabuses. We want our kids to learn a lot. And if that's all to be taught in the classroom, then that almost mitigates towards traditional teaching. Whereas if you can actually say, okay, move some of it to e-learning, and then the classroom time becomes real quality time and can be done in a very interactive way and innovative ways.
Yeah. Mark, according to you, what are the needs of today's generation?
The needs of today's generation? You'd better ask today's generation. Don't ask an old fogey like me, because I can't claim to speak for them. But you're right. There are certain needs and there are certain tangibles, and yes, we all talk to them. If we've got any sense as educators, we'd better be talking with them, and we'd better be listening to them. I think going back to what we were just talking about blended learning, I think blended learning actually meets a need for today's youngsters, which is to feel that they've got a little more control over things, to feel that they are trusted. You go into most schools today in India, still even up to class 11 and 12, students don't have free periods because we don't trust what they do with the time. They would just fritter it, they would waste it, they'd probably get in trouble around school and, make noise in the corridors. So we don't, so we map out every minute of their day and control it. And that, to my mind, clashes with something which is now innate in today's youngsters, which is saying, don't treat us like that, Have some respect for us.
What are the role of parents? Role of parents.
The role of parents.
You are discussing something.
I don't know. I think poor parents these days as well. They have a right. They're end users. They're end users of the education, especially in the private education system. We've got to listen to them because they pay our bills. Excuse me. But somewhere along the way, in terms of their relationship with children, I think some parents today, I think they feel a bit like they've been hit by a juggernaut, because the speed of change in their children's lives, there are things happening in their children's lives for which they've got no kind of root experience to fall back on. And so there are issues and challenges that their children are dealing with in their lives, often without communicating with the parents, because they probably are right in thinking that their parents wouldn't know where to begin to understand what's going on. Whether that's issues about, the children's social lives, whether it's about career decisions. Too often now, the parent who is thinking engineering, medicine, and perhaps if he's really kind of imaginative, he might be thinking law, is not open to what the youngster knows about the sheer variety of possibilities that are open to him or her. And so they can't have the conversation with their parents. Or if they fail to have the conversation with their parents, then they just get forced into pigeonholes where they don't feel they belong. And there's going to be conflict then later.
Mark, according to you, what are the facilitators for learners in 21st century?
The facilitators for learners, their own minds, their own brains. And I think apart from anything else, the fact that, to me, one of the great opportunities of working in learning is that, people used to say that people who went into space and did space exploration and space technology worked at the final frontier. They don't. I would say educators work at the final frontier because we work with the mind. And science really has had a very hazy understanding about how the mind really works, whether it's how it learns, how it remembers, how it makes decisions, how it does all kinds of things. And the problem was, until about 10 years ago, you could only really analyze minds or brains after someone had died, because you couldn't start getting in there and checking out what was happening with live brains. It wasn't really considered acceptable, socially acceptable. But today now, with MRI technology and things, scientists are now doing so much, and one of the results of this, we see it in the US, in many of the Ivy League universities, there are now combined departments of neurology and education. Because neurology and education are meeting in fascinating ways to understand. Because if we could get to a point where a student could learn what we require them to learn now in 18 years and have it in 4, think what we could do with the other 14 years. Massive potential.
Mark, my last question is, how can we be able to achieve the goals of inclusive education in India?
Okay, this inclusive word gets used a lot. I mean, the first thing I would want to do is probably put a question back to you. When you talk about inclusive, what do you mean? Do you mean in terms of the strata of society?
Yeah, education for all and good quality education for larger population.
I think, it's such a complex area. I personally believe, although I'm aware that it's not always necessarily considered to be, acceptable to say it, but I'm not sure that you can have an inclusive education system before you have an inclusive society. I'm not sure that education can be the tool to inclusivize, to bring about inclusion in the society. Because when society is divided, the fact is that, our children grow up in an environment where they hear and see that differentiation and separation is a norm and is the expectation. So to then tell them, but that doesn't apply in your classroom. In your classroom, you're all together. That just doesn't fit for the child. And so somewhere along the way, the society itself has got to be prepared to tackle those hard issues before making education tackle those issues.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much.